Quasars by Rich von Halt. Silence so complete it pressed against the eardrums hung in the cosmos beyond time. Then a single point of light pierced the infinite black. Not a star, something older, something dying, yet impossibly, defiantly alive. Quasar 3C273 pulsed like a heartbeat, its radiation streaming across billions of light years. This was light that left the quasar before humans walked upright, before Earth had a name. And yet, it was still arriving, still reaching out across 2.4 billion light years. Light from the past still reaching the present. Faint radio static began, soft at first, then building into something rhythmic, almost musical. The quasar pulsed once more, and the static swelled before fading into the mechanical beep of an alarm clock. In a bedroom frozen in time, a hand reached out from under old quilts, weathered and liver-spotted, trembling slightly as it silenced the alarm. Paul Vox, 65, sat up slowly in a dim morning light. He was thin, tired, with kind eyes that had learned not to expect much. Around him, floral wallpaper from the 1980s peeled away from the walls, sun-faded and curling at the edges. On the dresser sat a framed photograph of Mary, his mother, smiling in a way people don't anymore, when photographs still meant something. On the nightstand beside him, 3 amber prescription bottles. Paul picked up each one and read the labels like a morning prayer he'd learned by rote. Lisinopril, metformin, omeprazole. He opened each bottle with practiced fingers and swallowed the pills dry. 1, 2, 3. The grimace that followed was automatic. The house around him was so quiet he could hear the pills go down. He shuffled to the bathroom, where linoleum from the 70s curled at the corners, and a mirror that had seen better decades reflected back an old man he barely recognized. The pipes groaned in protest when he turned on the faucet. He brushed his teeth, stared at his reflection, rinsed, spat, then gripped the sink to steady himself against the morning's vertigo. 27 light years away, in a small chamber with smooth metallic walls, J.M. Bloom opened his eyes. At 35, he had sharp, intelligent features and eyes that seemed to look through things rather than at them. He sat up in one smooth motion with no grogginess, just the immediate clarity of waking. The room around him was perfectly organized, minimalist and sterile, with everything symmetrical and calibrated. A small meal tray sat on a side table with scrambled eggs that were golden and fluffy, toast perfectly browned, orange juice in a glass so clean it caught the light like a prism. J.M. picked up the fork and ate. The eggs glistened wrong. The toast didn't crumb. He chewed mechanically and swallowed without tasting. In the small adjacent washroom, he turned on the water, cupped his hands, and splashed his face. When he looked up at his reflection and dried his face on a towel that was impossibly white, he looked exactly as he had yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Back on Earth, Paul stood at his kitchen counter in his bathrobe, waiting for coffee to brew while the machine gurgled and hissed. The kitchen was stuck in 1985, with its avocado green appliances and linoleum with a pattern that was never in style. A calendar hung on the fridge with today's date circled in red pen, Dr. APPT, 2 p.m. Paul stared at it while the coffee brewed. He made toast with butter but no jam and ate standing up. There was no TV, no radio, just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of a wall clock measuring out the silence. On the windowsill sat a dead plant in a ceramic pot. Paul watered it anyway. J.M. stood before a massive viewport that stretched from floor to ceiling. Outside, Quasar 3C273 burned like a wound in the fabric of space itself, impossibly bright, with radiation pouring off it in visible waves. Beyond it, so distant it was barely visible, hung a faint smudge of light. Earth's galaxy, the Milky Way, a pale blue memory. J.M. pressed his hand against the glass, but his palm left no condensation, no mark. Behind him, a bank of monitors glowed with data. Day 20,075 shocked us all systems nominal. Solar relay, active. Quasar alignment, 87.3%. Time to convergence, 14 days, 8 hours. 20,075 days, J.M. said to the empty room. 55 years, give or take. His reflection in the glass looked back at him, young, unchanged. Paul dressed slowly in jeans worn soft at the knees and a flannel shirt with a small tear in the elbow. He picked up his phone from the nightstand, an old flip phone that felt heavy in his hand, and checked for messages. 0. He stared at the empty screen longer than necessary, as if willing it to change. It didn't. He set it down, picked up his wallet and keys, took a breath, and left. Outside, his modest 2-story home sat on a quiet street lined with houses from the 1960s, the kind of architecture that was modern once and was now just old. The lawn was mowed. The paint was fading but not peeling. His pickup truck, a 90s Ford, dented but reliable, sat in the driveway. Paul climbed in and the door creaked. The engine turned over twice before catching. He pulled out and drove away. Through the small coastal town, Paul drove past a church with a hand-painted sign that read, "All are welcome." Though half the letters had faded, he passed Rita's Diner with its promise of best pancakes on the coast since 1952. The radio played softly, an AM oldies station that was more static than music. Patsy Cline drifted in and out like a ghost, singing about being crazy for feeling so lonely. Paul didn't sing along. The sky was overcast, had been for weeks. The small shop wedged between a closed hardware store and a tax preparation office had a hand-painted sign, "Vox Restoration, Antiques Repaired," with smaller letters beneath promising, "If it's broken, we can fix it." Paul parked, unlocked the door, and flipped the cardboard sign from closed to open. The bell above the door chimed. Inside, the shop was cluttered in the way antique shops always are, an organized chaos of shelves lined with old radios in various states of resurrection. A 1940s Zenith, a Philco Cathedral radio, a Crossley with Art Deco curves. Clocks ticked out of sync, marking a dozen different times. The air smelled of oil and solder and old wood and time itself. Paul's workbench dominated the back of the shop, its scarred wood covered in tools, precision screwdrivers, wire strippers, a soldering iron, magnifying lamps. Vacuum tubes glowed softly in a testing rack. Paul removed his jacket and hung it on a hook, then put on his reading glasses, held together at one hinge with the electrical tape. He picked up his current project, a 1940s Zenith radio with its guts exposed, and examined a circuit board. He was testing a connection with a multimeter when the door chimed. Mrs. Cahill entered carefully, a woman in her early 70s with warm Hawaiian eyes and silver hair pulled back in a bun. She cradled a wrapped package like it was made of glass. "Paul, I hope I'm not too early," she said. Paul stood and smiled. It transformed his face. "Mrs. Cahill, you're never too early," he said. She approached the counter and unwrapped the package slowly, peeling away layers of newspaper, then bubble wrap, until a 1950s wooden radio emerged. Mahogany cabinet, brass dial, cloth speaker grill, restored to perfection. Mrs. Kahala's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, Paul, you're a miracle worker. My husband's radio. I thought it was gone forever," she said, her voice trailing off as her eyes began to shine. Paul came around the counter, plugged the radio in, and turned it on. The tubes warmed with a soft orange glow. Static came first. Then Paul adjusted the dial, and a big band song poured out, clear and rich. Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade filled the small shop. Mrs. Kahal closed her eyes, and tears slipped down her cheeks. "He played this for me," she said, "the night he proposed." Paul let the moment breathe, didn't rush it. Finally, she opened her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Really?" Paul turned down the volume, unplugged it, and wrapped it carefully. "Nothing's ever really gone, Mrs. Cahaley," he said. "Sometimes it just needs the right person to hear it again." She clutched the radio to her chest. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "40, for the parts," said Paul. "Paul, that's not enough," she protested. $40, he said firmly. She knew better than to argue. She paid in cash, 2 20s from a worn wallet. "You're a good man, Paul Vox," she said. "I just fix radios, Mrs. Cahale," said Paul. "No," she said, looking him in the eye. "You fix more than that." The bell chimed as she left. Paul returned to his workbench and sat, staring at the Zenith radio in front of him. The clock on the wall ticked through the hours. 9 a.m. became 11 a.m., became 1 p.m. Paul stood to reach for a tool on a high shelf, and the room tilted. He grabbed the workbench, knuckles white. The world swam around him. His vision tunneled. He was gasping, heart pounding, sweat cold on his forehead. He checked his watch with shaking hands. 1:45 p.m. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pill bottle, fumbled it open, shook one into his palm, and swallowed it dry. He breathed, waited for the world to stabilize. It did, slowly. He leaned against the bench with his eyes closed. 2 days later, Paul sat at his kitchen table taking notes on a pad of paper beside the machine. He was mid-conversation with J.M. about the relay systems when the machine surged. Sparks flew from the console, and Paul jumped back, his chair scraping across the floor. "What the?" Paul started. The tubes flared bright, too bright, and then one exploded. Glass shattered, and Paul shielded his face with his arm. The signal cut to static, then died completely. "J.M. J.M.!" Paul shouted. Nothing, just silence. Paul frantically checked the machine, running his hands over it, searching for the source of the failure. He found it quickly. The main oscillator tube was destroyed, its housing cracked, filament burned out, glass fragments scattered everywhere. He carefully removed it and held it up to the light. Stamped on the base, Type 6, L6GC, manufactured 1963. Paul's face fell. "No, no, no, no," he said. He tried to power the machine back on. Nothing happened. He grabbed his phone and typed frantically with shaking hands. 6L6GC vacuum tube 1963. He scrolled through the results, his hands shaking harder with each page. Obsolete, no longer manufactured. rare antique component collector's item, vintage audio equipment hard to source. He found a forum post looking for 1960s era 6L6G tube. Original manufacture only. Anyone have leads? The response: good luck. Those things are like gold. Paul tried the machine again, adjusting dials, checking connections. It clicked and hummed, but had no power. He slumped at the chair and stared at the broken tube in his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the silent machine. "I'm so sorry." The room was silent, no static, no hum, no connection. 27 light years away, J.M. sat at his console staring at the dead communications panel. He pressed transmit. Paul, are you there?" he said. Nothing. "Area, what happened?" asked J.M. "The connection terminated unexpectedly. Source unknown," said Aria's calm voice. "Can we re-establish?" asked J.M. "Negative. The receiving end is offline," said Aria. J.M. stared at the panel. "The fault appears to be on Earth's end," Aria added. J.M. leaned back and ran his hands through his hair. "He'll fix it," said J.M. "He's good at fixing things." "And if he can't?" asked Aria. J.M. didn't answer. He looked out the viewport at Earth's distant galaxy, a pale smudge against the cosmic dark. Back on Earth, Paul sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by tools, schematics, and spare parts. The machine lay disassembled in front of him. He'd been trying for hours, testing different tubes, checking wiring, adjusting settings. Nothing worked. He picked up the broken tube and turned it over in his hands before setting it down carefully. Then he picked up his phone and started dialing. "Hi, yeah, I'm looking for a vacuum tube, type 6, L6GC. Original manufacture 1960s, he said. He listened, then his face fell. "No? Okay, thanks." He hung up and dialed another number. "Hello, I'm trying to find a specific tube for an antique radio," he said. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. Paul kept calling. The next day passed in a blur. Paul made calls from the shop between repairs, searched auction sites on his computer, called more shops and more collectors. His face grew more desperate with each dead end. By evening, he sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone, gathering courage for one more call. "Hi, I'm looking for a 6L6GC tube, 1960s manufacture," he said. He paused, listening, then sat up straight. "You do? You have one?" His voice shook with relief. "Where are you located? Wilmington? That's an hour away. Can I come tonight?" He listened again. "Tomorrow morning works. 9 a.m. I'll be there. Thank you. Thank you so much." He hung up and exhaled, looking at the broken machine. "I'm coming back for you," he said. The next morning, early light painted the streets of Wilmington as Paul's truck pulled up in front of a small shop with a hand-painted sign, "Harris Collectibles, Vintage Electronics." Paul got out and went to the door where an old man in his 70s wearing glasses and a cardigan unlocked it from inside. "You must be Paul," said the old man. "Yes, sir." "Thank you for opening early," said Paul. "Come in," said the old man. Inside shelves were packed with old radios, tubes, and components. The old man went to a cabinet and pulled out a small box, opening it carefully. Inside sat a vacuum tube, still in original packaging. Type 6, L6, GC, 1963. Paul stared at it. "Last one I have," said the old man. "Been sitting here for 20 years. Never thought anyone would need it." "How much?" asked Paul. "50," said the old man. Paul pulled out his wallet and counted bills. He handed over everything he had, $62. "Keep the change," said Paul. The old man studied him with concerned eyes. "Son, you okay? You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't," said Paul. "Not until I fix this." The old man handed him the box. "Must be one hell of a radio," he said. "It's more than that," said Paul. "It's everything." Paul burst through his kitchen door, still holding the box. He went straight to the machine and set the box down carefully. His hands were steady despite his exhaustion as he removed the tube, examined it, and found it in perfect condition. He carefully installed it and powered on the machine. The tubes warmed. The hum returned. Static filled the room. Paul adjusted the frequency dial and the static shifted. Then J.M.'s voice broke through. Paul, are you there? I thought I lost you," said J.M. Paul grabbed the microphone. I'm here, he said. Relief flooded through both of them. "What happened?" asked J.M. "A tube blew out," said Paul. "I had to find a replacement, but I'm back." "Paul, I thought—" J.M. trailed off. "I know," said Paul. "Me too." They sat in the silence, just breathing, connected again. "J.M., I need to ask you something," said Paul. "Okay," said J.M. Paul took a breath. "I've been thinking about what you said. About 1964, about your wife, about leaving," said Paul. "Paul," J.M. started, "you left in 1964 for a mission to save the world?" asked Paul. "Yes," said J.M. Earlier that day, Paul had been in the garage picking up the documents he'd been collecting, the printed pages about space missions, about solar decay theories from the 1960s. He'd stared at them for a long time before making the call about the tube. "I've been researching," said Paul. "Everything's classified, but there are references, fragments, Project Luminous, a one-way mission, solar stabilization, a relay station." "Paul," said J.M. "Station Luminous 7, that's where you are," said Paul. Silence hung between them. "I found something else, in my mother's things," said Paul. Earlier that day, Paul had returned from the garage with a cardboard box. He'd set it on the table and opened it. Inside were old documents, mission briefings, technical schematics, a folder labeled Luminous 7 Mission Personnel. Paul had opened it, and a photograph had fallen out. A man in a NASA flight suit, age 35, standing in front of a spacecraft prototype. On the back, handwritten, "Joseph Michael Bloom, Mission Specialist, Luminous 7, October 1964. Paul had stared at the photo, flipped it back to study the face, then set it down carefully. "What does J.M. stand for?" asked Paul. Long silence stretched between them. "Joseph Michael," said J.M. Paul picked up the photograph again. "Joseph Michael Bloom. That's the name on this photo. The man in the NASA suit," said Paul. "Paul," said J.M. "Is your last name Bloom?" asked Paul. "Yes," said J.M. "Did you know? From the start?" asked Paul. Yes, from the moment you said your name. Paul. I knew, said J.M. Paul's hand shook. He set down the photograph. You're my father, said Paul. Yes, said J.M. Paul sat down hard and stared at the machine. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd stop calling, said J.M. Paul stood and started pacing. My mother told me you died when I was a baby. That's what I've believed my whole life, said Paul. She thought I was dead. They told her the mission failed, said J.M. But you did make it, said Paul. Yes, said J.M. And you've been out there for 60 years, said Paul. Yes, said J.M. Paul stopped pacing and sat down. Mom tried to reach you. She had this machine, said Paul. She did, for years. I couldn't respond. The system wasn't calibrated yet. By the time it was, she'd stopped trying, said J.M. Paul's eyes welled up. She died thinking you abandoned us, he said. I know, and I'm sorry, said J.M. They sat in silence. Were you the only one, the only choice for the mission? Asked Paul. Yes, I was the only one who could decode the signal from the quasar, the only one who understood the mathematics, said J.M. What signal? Asked Paul. In 1963, we detected a pattern embedded in the quasar's radiation. Mathematical, musical, instructions for building the relay, for saving Earth, said J.M. And you figured it out, said Paul. I did. And because I did, I had to go. One person, one-way trip. 2 weeks to decide, said J.M. That's not a choice, said Paul. I know, but I made it anyway, because if I didn't, you wouldn't be here. Your mother, everyone, said J.M. Paul wiped his eyes. Was it worth it if it cost you everything? He asked. It saved 8 billion people, but it cost me the one person I wanted to save most, said J.M. Paul looked at the photograph, his father frozen at age 35. How are you still 35? He asked. That's complicated. The alignment is in 4 days. After that, I'll explain everything, I promise, said J.M. Why not now? Asked Paul. Because there's something more important we need to discuss first. About the relay. About what happens during the alignment, said J.M. Paul leaned forward. What happens? He asked. The 3 quasars will converge. Their combined radiation will channel through the relay into the sun's core. It should stabilize permanently, said J.M. Should? Asked Paul. There's a problem. Something in the calculations. I've been trying to solve it for years. If the energy transfer isn't precise, if the timing is off by even milliseconds, the relay could destabilize the sun instead of saving it, said J.M. Paul sat back. How bad? He asked. Complete solar collapse within weeks, said J.M. Jesus, said Paul. Before I left, I worked out a fail-safe, a manual override, but I can't remember all of it. 60 years is a long time. I built that machine you're using. I would have kept backup copies, schematics, the override sequence, everything I needed in case something went wrong, said J.M. Paul looked at the box on the table, at the documents spread out. These? He asked. Yes, but there should be more. Engineering specs, the complete fail-safe protocol, said J.M. Paul started sorting through the papers. Mission briefings, personnel files, technical drawings of the machine. Nothing about a failsafe. "I don't see anything like that," said Paul. "There has to be more. I wouldn't have left without backup documentation. Somewhere your mother could find it if she needed to," said J.M. "Where would you keep it?" asked Paul. "Somewhere safe, somewhere only she would know to look," said J.M. Paul stood. "I'll search the house," he said. "Paul, we have 4 days," said J.M. "I'll find it, I promise," said Paul. That night, Paul tore through boxes in his garage, old tax returns, photo albums, his mother's belongings. Nothing. He moved to a filing cabinet and pulled open drawers, finding insurance documents, medical records, mortgage papers. At the back of the bottom drawer sat a manila envelope, sealed and dusty, labeled in his father's handwriting, "For emergency use only." Paul opened it. Inside were technical schematics, pages of equations, diagrams of the relay station, and a handwritten note. If primary systems fail, manual override is possible. Requires real-time adjustment during alignment. Sequence attached. JMB. Paul grabbed the papers and ran back to the kitchen. He spread the documents on the table and picked up the microphone. "JM, I found something," said Paul. "What is it?" asked JM. "Engineering specs and a note. It says there's a manual override, a sequence for real-time adjustment during the alignment," said Paul. JM sat forward at his console. "Read it to me," said JM. Paul picked up the first page and read aloud. "Phase 1. Manual dampener engagement at T-minus 30 seconds. Relay channels alpha through delta must be synchronized within 0.003 milliseconds," said Paul. He flipped to the next page. "Phase 2. Energy flow modulation. If quasar output exceeds projections by more than 12%, initiate emergency protocol 7, he continued. "That's it. That's what I need. Keep going," said J.M. Paul scanned the next section, his finger tracing the equations. "There's a calculation here for the adjustment factor. It uses solar core temperature, quasar radiation output, and relay efficiency," said Paul. "Read me the formula," said J.M. Paul read carefully. "Delta E equals R sub Q times C sub S divided by E sub R squared," he said. "Got it. That's the missing piece. That could work, but it requires manual input during the alignment, precise timing. If I'm off by even a fraction of a second, the relay fails. The sun destabilizes. Everything ends," said J.M. Paul looked at the document spread before him. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "I need you to be my eyes. During the alignment, I'll be making the adjustments, but I need someone monitoring the calculations, checking my work in real time," said J.M. "I'm not an engineer," said Paul. "You're my son. You can do this," said J.M. Paul stared at the equations. They were complex, overwhelming. "Okay, walk me through it," he said. Hours passed. Papers covered the entire table. Paul took notes while J.M. explained the override sequence. Coffee grew cold in forgotten cups. Paul's eyes were red with exhaustion, but he kept working. By morning, Paul had fallen asleep at the table, his head resting on his arms, papers scattered everywhere around him. A knock at the door woke him. He sat up, disoriented. Another knock came, louder this time. Paul stood and went to the front door, opening it to find a man in a dark suit holding up credentials. Jarvis Halifax, was in his early 40s with NASA identification. He had a lean build, dark hair graying at the sides, wire-rimmed glasses, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He moved with purpose. "Paul Vox?" said Halifax. "Yes," said Paul. "I'm Jarvis Halifax, NASA. We need to talk about transmissions originating from this address." "Deep space frequencies," said Halifax. Paul's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Sustained two-way communications with a source approximately 27 light-years from Earth," said Halifax. Paul didn't respond. "May I come in?" asked Halifax. "Do you have a warrant?" asked Paul. "I can get one, or you can cooperate," said Halifax. Paul stepped aside. Halifax entered and looked around at the cluttered house with papers everywhere. They moved toward the kitchen with Paul following. "Mr. Vox, unauthorized use of deep space frequencies is a federal offense. If you're communicating with an unknown entity," Halifax started. "It's not unknown. It's my father," said Paul. Halifax stopped and looked at Paul. "Your father?" he said. "He left on a mission in 1964, Project Luminous. He built a machine. I found it. We've been talking," said Paul. Halifax pulled out his phone and made a call, turning away. "This is Halifax. I need immediate verification on Joseph Michael Bloom. Project Luminous 1964, he said into the phone. He listened, and his expression changed. "Understood. Sending coordinates now," he said. He hung up and turned back to Paul. "Mr. Vox, this is now a matter of national security. I need you to come with us," said Halifax. "Why?" asked Paul. "Because people need to talk to you about your father, about the relay station, about what happens in 3 days," said Halifax. "I'm not going anywhere. I have work to do," said Paul. "This isn't a request," said Halifax. "Then arrest me. Otherwise, get out of my house," said Paul. Halifax stared at him for a long moment. "Someone will be in touch soon," he said. He left. Paul watched him go and closed the door. Paul sat at the table and stared at the machine before picking up the microphone. "JM, a government official, was just here," said Paul. "What did he want?" asked JM. "They know about the transmissions. They know about Project Luminous," said Paul. "Did you tell him anything?" asked JM. "Just that you're my father, that we've been communicating," said Paul. "They'll come back. They'll want the machine," said JM. "I won't let them take it," said Paul. "Paul, if they take it, we can't complete the override," said JM. "I know," said Paul. "We have 3 days. We need to finalize the sequence," said JM. "Okay, let's keep working," said Paul. 2 days passed in a blur. Paul and JM worked through the nights. Paul took detailed notes, practicing the calculations until his hands cramped. He barely slept, barely ate. The calendar pages seemed to flip themselves. 2 days became 1 day. The machine stayed on, always connected. The night before the alignment, Paul sat at the table exhausted and overwhelmed. Papers were everywhere, covered in equations he barely understood. He picked up the microphone. "JM?" said Paul. "Yeah?" said JM. "I don't know if I can do this," said Paul. "Yes, you can," said JM. "What if I make a mistake?" asked Paul. "You won't," said JM. How do you know? Asked Paul. Because you're brilliant and stubborn, just like me, said J.M. Paul almost smiled. I'm scared, he said. Me too, said J.M. What happens to you during the alignment? Asked Paul. Paul, J.M. started. Tell me, said Paul. J.M. took a breath. The energy surge, it's going to be massive. The station systems aren't designed to handle it long term. The relay will work. Earth will be saved, but the connection might be lost forever, said J.M. Paul's grip tightened on the microphone. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. This is what I came here to do, said J.M. I just found you, said Paul. Paul, listen. Even if the station fails, we'll have saved everyone. Your life, every life on Earth. That's worth it, said J.M. Paul wiped his eyes. Not to me, he said. I know, but it's not your choice. It's mine. And I made it 60 years ago, said J.M. They sat in silence. Big day tomorrow, said Paul. Paul, said J.M. Yeah, said Paul. I'm proud of you. I need you to know that, said J.M. I know, said Paul. And I love you. I should have said it sooner, said J.M. Paul's voice broke. I love you too. Dad, he said. He released the button and sat there, staring at the machine. 27 light years away, J.M. sat at his console staring at the communications panel. J.M., said Arya's voice. Yes, he said. Why are you having Paul involved when you've already figured it out? Asked Arya. This is something you wouldn't understand, said J.M. Enlighten me, said Arya. I'm just trying to have an important moment with my son, said J.M. You're right. I wouldn't understand. But if this brings you closer, said Arya. J.M. stared out at the universe. I hope so, he said. That night, Paul lay in bed unable to sleep. He stared at the ceiling, then got up and went to the bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked terrible, exhausted, sick. He opened the medicine cabinet and took out his pill bottles. He stared at them for a long moment, then set them on the counter. He closed the cabinet and went back to bed. The morning of the alignment arrived. Paul entered the kitchen where the machine sat on the table. He didn't turn it on, just stared at it. He sat down and picked up the microphone, then set it back down without pressing the button. His phone rang. He looked at it. Jarvis, Halifax. He declined the call. The phone rang again immediately. Unknown number, he answered. Hello, said Paul. Mr. Vox, my name is Radcliffe Knight. I'm with NASA. We need to meet. Today, said a voice. I'm busy, said Paul. Mr. Vox, we know about the alignment. We know what your father is attempting. And we know he's going to fail without help, said Knight. Paul sat up. What kind of help? He asked. The kind that requires you to trust us. We're sending a car. Be ready in 30 minutes, said Knight. The line went dead. Paul stared at his phone, then looked at the machine. 30 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up and parked in Paul's driveway. Two men got out. One was Halifax. The other was older, with military bearing. Radcliffe Knight was in his 50s, with gray at the temples, sharp eyes, and quiet authority. They approached the front door, and Paul opened it before they could knock. Your Knight, said Paul. Yes, this is my assistant, Jarvis Halifax. I believe you two met, said Knight. Paul side-eyed Halifax. "What do you want?" asked Paul. "To show you something. Something you need to see before the alignment," said Knight. "I'm not leaving the machine," said Paul. "Bring it," said Knight. Paul stared at him. "We have 3 hours until alignment. We can waste them arguing, or you can come with us," said Knight. Paul looked back at the kitchen. "Give me a minute," he said. Paul carefully unplugged the machine, wrapped it in a blanket, and carried it to the door. He followed Knight and Halifax to the SUV and got in the back seat with the machine on his lap. They drove away. In the SUV, Paul sat in the back with the machine wrapped in his arms. "Where are we going?" asked Paul. "Edwards Air Force Base, about 40 minutes, said Knight. "Why?" asked Paul. "We have information about your father," said Knight. Paul looked out the window. "I already know about the mission, about Project Luminous," he said. "You know some of it." "Not all of it," said Knight. They drove in silence. The SUV passed through security checkpoints at Edwards Air Force Base. High fences, armed guards. They drove deep into the base, past hangars and runways, before stopping at a nondescript building, Building 7. They got out. Paul followed Knight and Halifax down a long hallway with fluorescent lights and no windows. They reached a security door. Knight scanned his badge, and the door opened. He stopped and turned to Paul. "Before we go in, I need to prepare you," said Knight. "For what?" asked Paul. "Your father's body arrived 3 days ago from the relay station. Shortly after completing the relay installation, his body was placed in an automated return vessel. It just arrived," said Knight. Paul stopped walking. "What?" he said. "I know, and I'll explain how. But first, you need to see this," said Knight. Knight opened the door. Paul followed him inside. The room was large, cold, and clinical. In the center sat a cryogenic pod, transparent with frost on the glass. Inside was a body, a man, age 35, perfectly preserved, wearing a NASA flight suit with a mission patch that read Luminous 7. Paul approached slowly and stared at the face, his father, exactly as he looked in the photograph, young, unchanged. "He's been dead the whole time," said Paul. "Yes," said Knight. "Then how?" Paul started. "Before he died, his consciousness was uploaded, transferred into the relay station's quantum computer systems. His brain patterns, his memories, his personality, everything that made him who he was," said Knight. Paul couldn't look away from the body. "What you've been talking to, it's his mind, digitized, preserved, running the station for 6 decades, said Knight. Paul's legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the floor. Knight knelt beside him. "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot," said Knight. Is he really him?" asked Paul. "We believe so. Everything he knew, everything he felt, it's all still there, just in a different form," said Knight. Paul looked at the body again. Can I have a minute?" asked Paul. "Of course," said Knight. Knight and Halifax left the room. Paul sat there alone with his father's body. He stood and approached the pod, pressing his hand against the glass. "I understand now why you couldn't tell me, why you were afraid, but you're still my dad. It doesn't matter. I'm glad I got to know you," said Paul. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked to the door. Knight and Halifax waited outside in the corridor. How long until the alignment? Asked Paul. Knight checked his watch. 2 hours, 15 minutes, said Knight. Then we need to get back. I have work to do, said Paul. We have a communications array here, more powerful than your machine, Knight started. No, I'm using the machine my father built, the one he left for me, said Paul. Knight nodded. Then let's go, he said. Paul sat in the back seat of the SUV with the machine wrapped in the blanket on his lap. Knight drove with Halifax in the passenger seat. Paul stared out the window at the landscape rushing past. Will you be monitoring during the alignment? Asked Paul. Yes, from mission control. We'll track the energy output, but we can't communicate with the station directly. Only you can do that, said Knight. What if something goes wrong? Asked Paul. Then 8 billion people die. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm telling you the truth. Everything depends on you and your father getting this right, said Knight. No pressure, said Paul. Knight almost smiled. You'll do fine, he said. They drove in silence. The SUV pulled up and parked in Paul's driveway. Paul got out carrying the machine. We'll be monitoring from Edwards if you need anything, Knight started. I know where to find you, said Paul. Knight handed Paul a card with a phone number. Good luck, said Knight. Paul nodded and headed inside. The SUV drove away. Paul set the machine on the kitchen table and unwrapped it carefully. He plugged it in and powered it on. The tubes warmed and the hum returned. He picked up the microphone. J.M.? Dad? Said Paul. Paul, where have you been? The alignment starts in 90 minutes, said J.M. I needed to see something, said Paul. What? Asked J.M. Your body. They showed me at Edwards, said Paul. Long silence hung between them. So you know, said J.M. Yeah, I know, said Paul. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, said J.M. It's okay. I understand why you didn't, said Paul. Does it change anything, knowing what I am? Asked J.M. No, you're still my dad, said Paul. J.M.'s voice broke slightly. Thank you, he said. Paul spread the technical documents on the table, the override sequence, the calculations. Okay, walk me through it one more time, said Paul. The next hour passed in intense preparation. Paul took notes as J.M. explained the sequence again. He reviewed the calculations, set up multiple pages of references around the machine. The clock ticked down. 60 minutes became 45, then 30. Paul made coffee with shaking hands. The machine hummed steadily through it all. 15 minutes before the alignment, Paul sat at the table with everything ready. Papers organized, calculator, pen, microphone. He picked up the microphone. J.M., said Paul. I'm here, said J.M. 15 minutes, said Paul. I know, said J.M. Are you ready? asked Paul. As ready as I'll ever be, said J.M. They sat in silence. Dad? said Paul. Yeah, said J.M. Whatever happens, I'm glad I found you, said Paul. Me too, son, said J.M. 27 light years away, J.M. sat at his console watching monitors display the quasar positions. They were moving into alignment slowly, precisely. Alignment commencing, T-minus 10 minutes, said Arya's voice. Roger that, said J.M. JM, there's a 92% probability the energy surge will exceed station capacity, said Arya. I know, said JM. You won't survive it, said Arya. I know that too, said JM. Then why proceed? Asked Arya. Because that's the job, said JM. He looked out at the quasars moving closer, the light intensifying. Arya, if I don't make it, tell Paul I said goodbye, said JM. Tell him yourself. You still have time, said Arya. Back on Earth, Paul stared at the machine, at his father's technical notes, at the photograph. He picked up the microphone. JM? said Paul. Yeah? said JM. Thank you. For everything. For leaving. For saving us. For being my dad, said Paul. Paul, JM started. I needed to say it before, Paul said. I know. Thank you, said JM. Outside, the sky began to change, subtle at first, then more dramatic. 3 faint streaks appeared, growing brighter. The quasar's light, bent through space-time by the relay, visible from Earth for the first time in 2,500 years. Paul saw the light through the window. He stood and went outside to his backyard, staring up at the sky. The 3 brilliant streaks converged overhead. Beautiful, terrifying. His phone rang. Knight. Yeah? said Paul. It's starting. Get back inside. Stay on the line with your father, said Knight. I'm going, said Paul. He ran back inside and sat at the table, grabbing the microphone. JM, I'm here, said Paul. Alignment has begun. Quasar 3C273 at Mark 001, said JM. Paul checked the documents and found the corresponding page. Confirmed 001, said Paul. Initializing primary relay sequence, said JM. Monitors lit up. Energy readings spiked. Energy input at 20%. Climbing, said JM. Checking calculations, said Paul. He scanned the equations and compared them to the readouts JM was giving him. You're within parameters. Keep going, said Paul. 30%, 40%, said JM. The station shuddered. Alarms began to sound. Warning, hull integrity at 85%, said Arya. Compensating, said JM. Energy transfer rate? asked Paul. Climbing faster than projected, 55%, 60, said JM while Paul frantically checked the numbers. That's too fast. You need to slow it down, said Paul. I'm trying. The quasars are outputting more than we calculated, said JM. How much more? asked Paul. 15% above projections, said JM. Paul flipped through the documents, looking for the contingency protocols. He found it. Okay, there's a manual dampener, section 7 of the override sequence. Can you access it? asked Paul. Stand by, said JM. JM's fingers flew across the controls. Got it. Engaging dampener, said JM. The energy readings leveled off slightly. 70%, holding steady, said JM. Good. Keep it there, said Paul. Outside, the 3 streaks in the sky intensified, converging at a single point directly overhead. The light was almost blinding. The station shook violently, systems flashing red. Hull integrity at 70%, 65, 60, said Arya. How long until peak convergence? asked JM. 3 minutes, 40 seconds, said Arya. Paul We're approaching the critical phase. This is where I need to implement the manual override, said J.M. I'm ready. Tell me what you need, said Paul. I'm going to read you energy values. You need to plug them into the equation on page 7. Then tell me the adjustment factor, said J.M. Got it. Ready, said Paul. First value, quasar output. 4.27 megajoules, said J.M. Paul wrote frantically and flipped to page 7. Got it. Next, said Paul. Solar core temperature, 15.6 million Kelvin, said J.M. Paul scribbled it down. His hand shook. The pen slipped. Wait, say that again, said Paul. 15.6 million, said J.M. Got it. Next, said Paul. Relay efficiency, 83.4%, said J.M. Paul wrote it and grabbed the calculator, starting to punch in numbers. His hand shook. He hit the wrong button. The display showed an error. Shit, said Paul. He cleared it and started over. Paul, said J.M. Hold on, I'm recalculating, said Paul. We don't have time, said J.M. I know, just give me a second, said Paul. His finger hovered over the buttons. He took a breath. His vision blurred. The numbers swam. He gripped the edge of the table as pain shot through his abdomen. Paul, said J.M. Paul blinked hard and forced his eyes to focus. The pain didn't matter. He punched in 4.27 times 15.6 divided by 83.4. The calculator displayed 0.7987. He checked the equation on the page and squared it. 0.7987 squared equals 0.6379. Wait, that's not right, said Paul. He rechecked the formula, his eyes scanning the handwritten note. Delta E equals R sub Q times C sub S divided by E sub R squared. He realized the mistake. The denominator is squared, not the whole thing, said Paul. He redid it. 4.27 times 15.6 divided by 83.4 squared. The calculator displayed 0.732. He checked it twice and nodded. Adjustment factor is 0.732, said Paul. You're sure? Asked J.M. Yes, said Paul. Implementing now, said J.M. J.M. entered the adjustment. The systems responded. The energy flow stabilized. Adjustment successful. Energy transfer optimized, said Arya. It's working, said J.M. He looked at the monitors showing the solar core readings. They were stabilizing. The sun was responding. Paul, it's working. The sun is stabilizing, said J.M. Paul exhaled and almost laughed. We did it? He asked. Not yet. Peak convergence in 90 seconds. This is where everything either works or doesn't, said J.M. What do you need me to do? Asked Paul. Just stay on the line, said J.M. I'm not going anywhere, said Paul. The quasars reached peak alignment. The energy surge was massive. Every system on the station redlined. Hull integrity at 50%, 45, 40, said Arya. Sparks flew from the consoles. Smoke filled the command center. J.M. shielded his face but kept working. Critical failure imminent in main power systems, said Arya. Come on, said J.M. The monitors showed the solar core accepting the energy, restarting. It was working. Solar stabilization confirmed. The relay is successful, said Arya. Paul, Did you hear that? We did it. The sun is stable, said J.M. Paul gripped the microphone. I heard. Dad, you did it, said Paul. We did it, said J.M. The station shuddered violently. A massive explosion erupted somewhere deep in the hull. Catastrophic system failure. Hull breach in sections 4 through 9. Life support offline, said Arya. Arya, how long? Asked J.M. Station will be uninhabitable in 90 seconds, said Arya. J.M. picked up the microphone. Paul, said J.M. I'm here. What's happening? Asked Paul. The station is failing. I don't have much time, said J.M. Paul stood, panic rising. No, you can't, said Paul. Paul, listen. The relay is complete. Earth is safe. Forever. That's what matters, said J.M. You matter. Dad, please, said Paul. I need you to do something for me, said J.M. What? Asked Paul. Live. Really live. Be happy, said J.M. Tears streamed down Paul's face. I don't want to lose you, said Paul. You won't. I'll always be with you, in the light, in the stars. Whenever you look up, I'll be there, said J.M. The station was coming apart. Systems exploding, walls cracking. J.M. sat at the console, calm. Paul, I have to go now, said J.M. Dad, wait, said Paul. I love you, son. I always have. I always will, said J.M. I love you too, said Paul. Goodbye, Paul, said J.M. He released the transmit button. The station shuddered one final time. Everything went dark. The machine cut to static, then silence. Paul sat there gripping the microphone. Dad, are you there? Said Paul. Nothing. Please answer, said Paul. Just silence. Paul set down the microphone and put his head in his hands. He sobbed. Outside, the 3 streaks in the sky pulsed one final time, brilliant and blinding. Then they slowly faded. The sky returned to normal, gray and overcast, but something was different, subtly brighter. Later, Paul still sat at the table. The machine was still on, still humming, but there was no signal. His phone rang. Night. Yeah? Said Paul. It worked. Solar output is stable. Projections show it'll remain that way indefinitely. Your father, he saved us all, said Knight. I know, said Paul. I'm sorry for your loss, said Knight. Thank you, said Paul. He hung up and sat there, staring at the machine. Weeks later, Paul stood in his backyard at night, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear for the first time in months. In the distance, barely visible, was the faint glow of Quasar 3C273, still burning, still reaching across impossible distances. Paul smiled. Thank you, Dad, he said. Months passed. The shop was busy with customers browsing. Paul worked at his workbench on a radio when the door chimed. A woman in her 30s with kind eyes entered. Excuse me, are you Paul? She asked. Paul looked up. That's me, he said. My neighbor said you're the best. I have my grandfather's clock. It stopped working years ago, she said. Paul smiled. Let me take a look, he said. She handed him the clock, and he examined it. I can fix this. Come back next week? Asked Paul. Thank you, really, she said. She left, and Paul returned to his work. He was humming, didn't even realize it. Later, Paul walked through the neighborhood at a steady, healthy pace. The neighbor waved and he waved back. The sky was blue with no clouds. That evening, Paul sat at the kitchen table. The machine was still there, humming softly. Then, a flicker, a pulse of light from one of the tubes. Paul sat up and stared at it. Another pulse came, faint and rhythmic. Paul picked up the microphone. "Dad," said Paul. No voice came, but the pulses continued, steady, like a heartbeat. Paul smiled through his tears and touched the machine. He stood from the table. "Thank you for everything," said Paul. He shut the light off and exited the room. The pulses continued faster, light in the darkness. In the cosmos beyond time, the Quasar 3C273 still burned. Light streamed across billions of light years. A signal sent into the dark, still reaching out.